So today we have a guest with us that makes me feel old. And I'll tell you why. I know that you tell me I'm the young one, but like I was very fortunate to speak at University of Ottawa recently, and I met Megan, our guest today, and it was like a business slash medical students. And she is a bright star, let me tell you. And we really want to talk to her today because I do feel like there's a lot of mental health and stress and things like that as people are coming out into the real world and trying to establish themselves and see what life actually holds. And for Megan, she was even looking at building a business, which coming out of school and building a business is tough, right? It's a whole new world.
Um, the other thing too, when you were telling me about that I thought was intriguing is that when we first started doing this show, we talked to some of the other women who are on our kind of internal team. After I found that Stats Canada report about women and mental health, and the younger generation has really high numbers. I think it's 1 in 4 and almost into 1 in 3 of women under 24. And so, we've obviously covered a lot of topics as we've become, in a up and running kind of building phase. And that stat still kind of stuck with me as what is going on there. And I'm really glad that you met our next guest because she's going to tell us what's going on.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think that to your point, like it's a little bit of everything. I was gonna say it's not one thing or the other, right? It's, they lots of our younger folks cannot afford housing. They need to, start a business or get into the work sector. They're leaving behind or somewhat leaving behind their peer groups, which I didn't have a problem. I'm a pretty big loner, so I didn't have a peer group when I left. But there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of different changes. So I thought, let's
Yeah.
talk to Megan, see what she's up to.
Well, and I'm uh technically in the age now where I'm in grandma age, right? Which I'm not a grandmother, but I am in the age where I could be. I think I'm going to be a grandma to your daughter. Just thinking that
Inherited one, yes.
I'm going to inherit her. Um and I think that this show is going to be really important because at almost 57, I don't want to be out of touch with the younger generation. I don't want to be that 57-year-old who used to say to me, oh, men run a newsroom and that's just the way that it is. Because I was the 24-year-old who said, nah, I'm going into these locker rooms and I'm going to be covering the NHL. And I think as we get older, we sort of get like, oh, the stereotype that I mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
back in the good old days. And I want to do that. And I think that when we listen to younger people, it helps grow our brains.
I also specifically remember when I got out of school and I was 24 when I started in the senior living field, which is many moons ago. But you know, what was interesting is I totally knew what I was doing. I mean, I was new, I was green, but that didn't mean I was uneducated or unknowledgeable.
Right.
But then I started to work with seniors, which is like a really large divide, generally speaking.
That's a big one.
Then going into other professions. And so many times people will tell me I'm too young to do this and like, all that. And I really had to prove myself and show them that I could handle it. And it's just really interesting. I even get that comment now because of, my good genes. But the thing is that, younger folks, younger people are up against a lot of different stuff that I don't think people generally take into consideration. And like that, those comments that I dealt with were a bit onto my confidence, right? And it's like, oh, I'm too young to be a professional. I'm too young to do that. But like, where the hell do we start then? Right? Like you got to start somewhere. And I think that the what is it? I think that it's too steep. I think that not the learning curve, but I think that like the traverse into professional expert. Although you get expertise from doing things a long time, I think that it's undervalued that you're coming in with a certain amount of knowledge too, and that, yeah, you need to prove yourself in general in the world, but I think people are too hard on younger people, thinking that they
Oh,
can't do it because they're
sure.
too young, right?
Yeah, and I can't wait to talk to our guest because as somebody that blew up, the expected life of get the bigger house and, settle down and all that kind of stuff. And, Megan's going to kind of wonder why I'm sitting in the woods. So we might want to fill her in about that. But I think that new ideas are amazing because what has happened in terms of infrastructure, mental health. We're all very nationalistic right now because of the attack from the United States on our trade, but we also have made some our generation, and I think you're in the middle one. We've made some pretty big mistakes, and new eyes is something that we need.
New eyes, new blood. Let's bring Megan in on that note.
Sure.
Let's do it. Hi, Megan.
Hi,
Welcome to the Inner Shift podcast. We are thrilled to have you. We were
I'm
just
thrilled to be here.
we were just chatting behind the scenes of how difficult it can be, how exciting but difficult it can be to be launching out of school and
Yes.
figure it out. And you and I had a brief conversation when I met you, and it's really just like, what do we do? So I think maybe the way we could start today is to tell us, what it's kind of like on this emotional
Yeah.
journey. Like, you're preparing to leave school now, go into the next chapter. What are you up to? What are you going to be looking at? Like, what are your hopes and dreams, Megan? Tell us everything.
Okay, so yeah, I just recently graduated, or I guess I have my graduation ceremony in June. But I've recently moved out of Ottawa. I'm back living with my parents for the summer, and then I'm actually headed to Toronto. Um, but right now it's a really weird time. Um, Everyone, I lived in a house of six girls, and everyone's kind of off doing.
Oh, I've done that. I've done
Yes,
that.
yes.
Yee.
Um, and it's everyone's just doing different things, and no one really knows what they're doing. And for me, I've kind of felt like it's almost a step backwards, which you would think that graduating and moving on should be like a step forward and a step into your new life, but it almost feels like a step backwards all of a sudden. I'm not waking up and studying every day. I don't have that purpose and that belonging of being a student and having my student routine and working to achieve something. Um, I don't have that typical community around me. I kind of lost a bit of independence from coming back home. And then I have just right now I'm sitting and I'm waiting, and I know a lot of students are in my position where a lot of offers come out May 15th. So a lot of people don't even really know what they're doing next year. And it's kind of just you're in a weird spot that just feels flat. Like everything kind of just feels like it's stopped and the world is still going, but I'm not going with it. And yeah, so it's definitely a really weird period, especially social media. I'm home and I'm just seeing what everyone else is doing. And yeah, I guess it's just I think the best way for me to describe it is I kind of just feel like flat, like right now.
You're
Yeah,
in
you're in limbo.
that
Yeah,
dreaded
yeah,
gray zone that I hate.
yeah,
Well,
yes. Oh my goodness, yeah.
I feel like it's the worst. When you get out of it, you're like, oh, thank goodness. But
But then it's like, now what?
well, and it's really interesting that you've described it that way because, I mean, schooling was, a clip ago for me and Kimothy at this point. But like, to be honest, like, yeah, I do remember those, like, even in between school, like in between semesters, right?
Yeah,
Like in the summer or whatever. It's just like
yeah.
this weird feeling. Did you because you were, kind of intensely in student life, living with other students and
Mhm.
whatnot, how are your friendships now? Like, have they changed now that you've moved out of Ottawa, and kind of doing your next step? Like, what does that look like?
Um, definitely changed. I don't think they're any less, and I think living with those people for the past 3 years, we stay connected and we send each other updates. But even I think it was 3 days ago, we were talking about doing a group call or just sending each other video updates, and everyone was talking just about updates. And I was just like, I don't really know what to update. Like, in not a bad way. It's good I get some rest, but it's like I don't have anything to update. So it's kind of hard to stay in touch and keep talking to people when it's like I was just unpacking. I've been applying to jobs and I don't have anything to update, and then I kind of shell myself up because I kind of feel insecure about that and don't really know what to say and contribute. Um it's also hard because in this period of uncertainty, I do not think social media is my friend. And I think a lot of people would agree that the constant comparison and highlight reel makes it really difficult in this time. Um, but then you stay off social media, and that's the main way that people my age communicate. So it's like, well, if I don't stay on social media and stay up to date with everyone and partake in that way, then I'm losing those connections. So it's been really hard finding a balance for me, trying to figure out to use social media and stay in contact with people, but not go down that dark spiral of comparing and just seeing all these other acquaintances that I've met in school and what they're doing. And yeah, so
Can I ask you, because I feel like I'm loading on. Actually, when you said that you there were 6 of you,
yeah.
I did a summer work program in London, England,
Oh my goodness,
and
wow.
there were 6 of us with 1 bathroom.
Wow. We
1
had two,
bathroom.
thank goodness.
1. So
Wow.
that's my, when I was a kid, we only had 1 bathroom. But I I've been watching a lot of what's happening with the economy for other reasons to do with
Yeah.
my actual work life. And a lot of the young adults that I know are going home, staying home, returning home to the family home. And
Mhm.
we've talked on this show about the pressure of those parents who thought they were going to sell the family home one day and, you know, travel or do whatever. And now this economy is really unnerving people. How do you feel about the fact that, you know, the dream is you graduate, you get a great job, you get money, right? You start to earn money. So how are you dealing with that stress?
Um, dealing the I'm um I think again it kind of just feels like a step backwards. I wasn't expecting to come back home after this, and I'm fortunate that I'm continuing my education, so I'm going back out, but then again, I'm gonna be in more student debt and I'm gonna end up coming home, which in another 4 years I'll be 25, 26, and I'll be moving home again. And I think growing up, that was never like you move out at the age of 20, and people just don't do that now. And even when you get a job, it's a lot of the time, depending what you're doing too, you're working from home. So it's kind of like there's no like
Yeah.
real reason to be living somewhere else. And if it's not financially viable, and if I'm not going to be in person anyways, it's like, why wouldn't I? But I think being at home, I love my family and everything, but it really does feel like a step back, and it's
Yeah.
hard to like
Do
grow and
you would have been a COVID student, right?
yes.
Right. So
Yes.
you've got the double whammy happening, COVID and now a tanking economy. Well, it's not
Yes.
tanking. I shouldn't be dramatic, but a challenged economy. So
Yeah.
you're getting it from both sides. I know Amy has a question, but just so that everybody knows, what did you graduate with? I'm a little confused about the health and the business part. What's
Um,
the plan?
yeah,
What's the
so
dream?
I'm graduating with a honors bachelor of health science, and then I minored in business management. And
Mark?
yes, yes. And that's kind of the reason why I did it. It was I knew that I wasn't planning on going to med school and I wasn't going into nursing. And doing health science, you can go a lot of different ways. There's the public health route, which again, I didn't really think that I wanted to do, but even still, I think business would have been super important and helpful in that sense. Um, but I like the specializations of healthcare, and a lot of those do they're entrepreneurs and you're owning your own practice and stuff. So I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do, but I knew it was something along those lines and thought that it'd definitely be good to just have that business background. Um, and even just for my education, instead of taking some fun classes here and there, this is a class that when I take accounting, even if I don't go into accounting, that's really important stuff to learn. And now it's really beneficial because I'm going into school for naturopathic medicine in September. So in when I graduate, hopefully, thank you, in 4 years, then I will ideally own my own practice. So yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
I have
You
multiple
will.
questions.
You will.
Yeah, you will.
Okay.
Absolutely. I have multiple
Her
questions,
turn.
but on
Her turn.
on that note, how do you feel about doing another 4 years?
Um,
It's a lot.
it is a lot, and I'm definitely a little bit intimidated, and I'm almost predicting the anxiety I'm gonna feel because I know a lot of people that aren't going back to school, or they are, and they're just 2-year programs. So in this September, I think I'll be okay. I'll be feeling like I'm on track with everyone. And then 2 years from now, if you asked me again, I might feel a little bit different when everyone's done their education and I still have 2 more years to go. But I'm really excited, and I'm excited to do something more hands-on. And I think undergrad, at least my degree, it was really broad. We learned a lot. We did anatomy classes, and then we focused on the determinants of health, and we did so much stuff that it didn't really like guide you in one direction, which is incredible. And I know so many students that are going different directions, which is great. Um, but for this, I'm excited to really get expertise on one sort of topic. So I'm excited to feel like I really know everything about it. Not that you can never know everything, but instead of just like little things here and there. So I'm excited to hopefully excel in that. And I'm also kind of consider it a blessing because I don't think I'm really ready to go into the real world, especially what you were talking about with the economy. Right now, I don't know. I don't know if I want to participate in that anyways. And being how I, again, was a COVID student and lost essentially my first year, it was all online, and I had one in person, and then there was sometimes when campus shut down, I think for a full month, and you couldn't even go to the dining hall. You brought takeout and you ate in your room. And like, so I think that really formative and developmental year of first year, which I had a great time nonetheless. I didn't develop the way a typical university student would throughout those 4 years. So I'm excited to go into school and have a little bit more grace time, a little bit more time before I go into the real world. But I'm again going to be on my own, new city, definitely developing adulting, but not full-fledged adulting, and that's it yet. So it's kind of a nice grace period.
Nice. Tell me, because I'm very curious,
Yes.
how is it living with your parents again? Like, what is that like? Because I couldn't do that. I mean, sounds like I have a very different relationship, but generally speaking, it's just like, how is that like, how is that dynamic? How is it like, I'm very curious because it's like you are a full person, right? And
Yes.
so you're a full adult. And so
Yes.
you're back at your parents, and it's like, is that, is there that overhanging like childhood of parent, what am I trying to say? It's kind of like, when you're younger, right? The parents are like, here's your curfew, here, like the expectations and stuff. Like, what is it like being an adult living with your parents now?
Yeah, it's really weird, and I think we're both kind of trying to figure it out. And again, it is like that. It's not that it's a curfew, but it's like if I'm going somewhere, I'm telling them where I'm going. And there's that expectation. And there's also kind of like expectation where sometimes, like I cook for myself and I'm used to doing everything for myself. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, like why don't you do it for everyone? And it's like, well, I don't want to cook for everyone. And even I was doing the dishes the other day, and my dad was just saying to use a different cloth or a different soap or something like that. And I was like, well, this way works. And it's like they have their set ways and I have my set ways, and now we're trying to merge them, but I'm under their roof. And but I have 4 years of living on my own, and I figured out what works for me and how I like to do things, and some of it's not the same. So I think it's been a learning curve for both of us. Um, and I think what helps me, and honestly, probably what helps them, we haven't talked about this, is knowing that it's 4 months and that I will be going, and just to, it's
Hang
summer,
in there.
it's okay. Both of us will be okay. I think a lot of people my age would agree that living without your parents, you have a better relationship than living with them, because now that we have such big personalities and grown into ourselves more, there can be clashing. So I think it's just reminding myself that it's 4 months and that right now I'm under their roof and I can do things my way, but understand that if they want things a different way, then I just have to go with it and be okay with that. But that's definitely been difficult. It's only been 2 weeks, not even actually, but
And you're like,
yeah.
let me out. 2 weeks too long.
I think they're probably feeling the same way.
Fair enough.
Can I ask, you mentioned you said the word anxiety,
Yes.
and I am learning that that looks different for everybody. So my anxiety is butterflies in the chest, but also insomnia, um, running through things in my brain over and over, like the what ifs, like
Yeah.
what if this happens? What if that happens? I need like a strategic plan for A, B, and C.
Mhm.
What does anxiety look like and feel like for you, and maybe even some of your friends that you've talked to? Because I think it's individual to the person.
Yeah, definitely an individual experience. And I think that there are symptoms and experiences that are pretty general, like the butterflies in your stomach. Um, and I have one roommate who, when she was anxious, or I guess ex-roommate, but I don't like saying that yet.
Yeah.
When she was anxious, it was really motivating, she was anxious, so she would spend all day in the library and like try to work through it that way. Um, and like using
Mhm.
as a motivating factor, and like that would drive her a lot. And then I think for me, anxiety, it can obviously depend on the situation as well. And sometimes it can just shut me down a little. I think I isolate into myself. I definitely still feel my head. It doesn't ever stop going, and my thoughts, and again, insomnia, not sleeping because your head just doesn't stop going.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, the butterflies in the stomach. I think anxiety affects my eating patterns and just my physical body. I don't get as hungry, or all of a sudden I'm stress eating and my stomach is just unsettled the whole time, so I'm not eating. And even going to the gym, I like going to group Pilates classes and stuff like that, and I don't feel strong in myself because it's just like your mind not stopping just makes my body just tired and burnt out. And I think that's like the number one thing for me, is that I'm anxious, and if I don't kind of work through it in a beneficial way and soon enough, it just leads to a burnout.
How do
You're
you?
way smarter than I ever was at your age.
I was literally thinking the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. How do you work through it? Like, do you have support systems? Do you do anything like meditation or anything like that? Like, what helps you?
Um, Honestly, walks help a lot. Walks, and not always just walking. Again, sometimes I'm really tired, but if I walk to a bench or somewhere outside and just sit, I try not to bring my phone, or if I bring my phone, I turn it off. You can do settings on your phone where you put them on like a personal mode so you can't access certain apps and you won't get certain notifications. So I might listen to a podcast or something. Um, and sometimes there are podcasts that makes you feel like you're not alone, and sometimes it's just something that'll make you laugh. and smile and remember, once you have that laughter or something, it's kind of like a reset. I do like meditation, and making my room my safe space is really good too. I just try not to do too much school in there sometimes if I need to, because then it's, like it might not be a safe space anymore. It might be like riddled with like stress and stuff. Um, and I honestly just have a really good support system for talking, even if it's my roommates or my parents or whatever. And writing stuff down. I have learned that I'm not always a pen and paper girl. I think a lot of people in my generation aren't. But even just the journal app in the phone or computer and just getting it all out, it really, really helps. And I think I also have some education on, health science does talk a lot about mental health. So we learn about
Good.
strategies and symptoms. So when I'm writing stuff down, I can kind of connect the dots and I'm like, oh, maybe that's related to that. And just reminding myself that eating good and exercising, even when I am burnt out and I don't feel good about it, and I have a crappy workout and I'm not necessarily eating the most food, just taking care of myself. That's a really, really big thing that we learn in health science is just um, taking care of your body and how it affects your body. Your mind affects your stomach, which affects your physical exercise, and just everything is connected. So trying not to let one lead into all of the others. If my mind's not good, maybe I can focus on food or something.
For for what it's worth, for peace of mind, I have to tell you, you are light years ahead of where I was at your age. And I mean it. I know, like, it's a odd thing to say, but like, I just feel like the stuff that you have figured out at your age is shit that I'm just figuring out now.
Well,
And
thank you.
so,
That does give me some peace of
I
mind.
mean, and I think that, for what it's worth, to keep that kind of, information up front, because the thing is that, like, the way that you speak and the way that you are able to, not compartmentalize, but acknowledge anxiety and then do what you have to do to figure it out. Like, we all have anxiety. We all are dealing with stuff. But the way that you deal with it, and the way that you speak about it, I have to tell you, most people, like, I'm in my 40s, most people my age are just getting there now, if they ever get there at all. So
Thank
bravo.
you. Thank you. Again, easier said than done, as is are most things, but
But the knowledge
yeah.
around it, right? Like,
Yeah.
the thing is that for sure everything is easier said than done, and you're not 100%. It always doesn't happen that way.
Hmm.
But the thought process that you've built in will serve you well, right? Because we all know there's valleys, there's, peaks
Yes.
and valleys. Um, but that thought process, as a millennial, like, we're just getting there, really. We're just getting
Yeah,
there.
and I think the other important thing too, Amy, is, I have multi-generational trauma in my bloodline, and the way that it was dealt with by my parents, my grandparents, and presumably great grandparents who I think came over on boats, was not to talk about it. Like, I was probably Amy's age before I even heard reference to mental health the way that we see it
Wow.
now. It was always the negative, right? Which was, you have mental issues, or, you're completely mental, like things that we would never say now. And
Hmm.
um, I think too that your generation has the ability to break that chain of generational trauma, because we never talked about it. And my dad was a psychologist and a professor at Queen's.
Wow.
We never, and he was a wonderful, wonderful human being, but we never talked about my mother's mental health challenges were significant. And it was just like, oh, just keep everything quiet. And so I grew up just choking down feelings. Like, you
I
know,
think I think what Megan really has going for her, if I may,
Yeah.
because we've both learned, kind of like, I have trauma in my family too, right? And so there's a whole bunch of us, like, breaking those traumas that have
yeah.
caused anxiety, overwhelm, and all that stuff. And I think that what I feel like you're learning, not only just to, like, take care of the anxiety and stuff, but that also comes with boundary setting. And that
Yes.
comes with all of that stuff that people like Kimothy and I and our age groups and stuff didn't literally learn until now, because mental health wasn't forward enough when we were younger. That it, like, now I feel like in your generation, you guys are benefiting from the conversation that
Yeah.
people are having about mental health, and you know how important boundary setting and things like that are.
For sure. And yeah, I think social media is complicated. It's a very double-edged sword,
Yep.
in my opinion. But I do think that the greater talks about mental health and understanding, um, again, mental health, it's a very broad, so it can mean so many different things, but just talking about like more commonly like anxiety and depression and stuff like that, like on social media, those discussions, it can definitely be easier like that because people will always say it's easier to hide behind a screen, and sometimes that can have negatives.
Mhm.
Um, but in conversations like this, where you need to be more vulnerable and like people are talking about mental health, they do have that barrier and it is a little bit more comfortable online, which sparks a lot more of a conversation. And I think just in general, like we talk about it in school. I want to say we even talked about it in high school, and maybe not mental health, but like talking about just symptoms you might face and strategies. And I think it's a really big part of education now, and it's implemented into workplaces and sports teams, like schooling. It is really heavily talked about, and management as well. So I think it's easier for people to be aware of what they're experiencing and might work for them. Um, when I talked about how social media is a double-edged sword, sometimes there's a fine line between, I almost find that if it's talked about too much as if it's normal, destigmatizing it is good, but normalizing it can be worrisome because then it's like, oh, everyone has this, like it's fine, it's normal. And then that creates maybe people not taking care of themselves because it's normal and everyone deals with it. But just
Oh,
because,
what that is a brilliant point. That
yeah.
I want to just stop there. Can you just repeat that about we don't want it to be normalized because
Yeah, we want
then
the destigmatization, but normalization, and then all of a sudden people just don't do anything, and then you're making it worse for yourself, like
right.
it is normal to experience um issues, and everyone has their struggles and things happen in life, and that's normal. But to normalize it to the point where like it's almost not an issue, where it's like
Just
it's just a fact. Like, I think that can cause a really like negative slope.
Yeah,
well,
a
because
disservice.
presumably, when Amy and I look at, the stats and why we decided to do this podcast and
Yeah.
um to speak out about a bunch of things, if governments, for example, think it's just normal, then the reality is they're not going to invest in the things
Yeah,
necessary uh, to help people who have mental health challenges. But the other part of that, I think, is that if we normalize it, to your point, which I think was like so important, if we normalize it, then we're just going to have another generation of people and another generation of people. And quite honestly, I think the numbers will increase.
yeah. I think normalizing it kind of leads to minimizing it in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my
And
aha moment. Like, oh,
yeah,
now I get it. Yeah.
yeah. I fully agree with the generations thing too.
Yeah.
One of my courses in my undergrad, we talked a lot about how a mother's stress impacts a developing fetus. And I just, being as how we're talking about women's mental health, I think that's like a really good point, is that we're learning so much about how stress can impact just a mother's pregnancy, which therefore impacts a fetus throughout their whole life. We talked about experiencing like a child experiencing some sort of anxiety at the age of 12 for the first time, and how it relates all the way back, and learning about it is one thing and like understanding it, but it's the prevention. We want to create a healthier generation now because the people that will be um, bringing more life into the world, if they're not healthy, then it's just such a negative spiral. So I do think that conversations like this are really important and to understand like how it will just go generation and generation and generation.
Well, and I think that, I mean,
Yeah.
for me, you just nailed it. I think that's why Kimothy's loved, because I have exactly that trauma, right? And
Yeah.
so that's stuff that I've been dealing with myself, but because it wasn't healed, because the mothers of the millennials, let's say
Hmm.
at this point, didn't know
Yep.
how to deal with it, right? Like you're thinking like mothers in the 80s, right? So we didn't know how to deal with it. Not me. I was a child in the 80s. So
Yeah.
my mother didn't know how to deal with it like every other, because we weren't
Yeah.
talking about it. But then the other side of that coin, unfortunately, is a bunch of 40-year-olds being like, I'm out, because we got to stop it somewhere, right? And so there's a
Yeah.
lot of us that are estranged from our families
Hmm.
because somebody has to stop this madness. And
Yeah.
I feel hopeful and maybe a little emotional that you might not have to do that because it's terrible, right? Like it's a terrible path. And I think that I'm hopeful for you and your generation that maybe you've got your shit figured out more than we did.
Oh,
Yeah,
I have no doubt. I have no doubt.
Yeah.
I think that's like a really important thing that the younger generation, I'll say, I guess I'm a part of the younger
Yeah.
generation. Um, and even what we were talking about in school is a lot of prevention. And that's like a really big focus right now is on prevention. So it kind of is shifting healthcare a little bit. And I think that can be a little bit like hard for older generations to understand like when healthcare is going a bit differently and just all these specializations and stuff. It is new. And I think that combining, um, people with experience in healthcare and then younger generations innovation can really make a stronger system and just focusing on prevention instead of just care. Because a lot of it right now, like health is there is no end. You can't just you solve it, you take a medication, you do this and it's done. Like it's never going to end. It'll be your whole life. And learning prevention is a lot easier than like going through treatment. So I think
Well,
that's like a really big thing we talked about.
can I ask you, you mentioned medication
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in the stats when we found the Statistics Canada report, um,
Mhm.
the number of people who are medicating uh, their anxiety and depression. And quite
Mhm.
honestly, in a lot of cases, a lot of people cannot afford the counseling necessary to kind of work through that.
Yeah.
So, and this is
Yeah.
my personal opinion, but big pharma is medicating a lot of people who just want to stay numb. When you
Yeah.
you just finished the program that is the most up to date of how we're educating our future healthcare providers, what is said about pharma versus doing the work?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because you'll have different classes, like
Mm,
different courses, and that's almost like the real world. You have different specializations that focus on different things. I had a class on pharmaceuticals and talking about how that helps so much. And then we had a class on developmental origins of disease and stuff, and that focuses more on prevention. And I think that kind of leads into the specializations and specialties. People that are in pharmacy school are just they're leaning into those medications and stuff. And then I would say for
yeah.
myself that's hoping to pursue naturopathic medicine is focusing on the prevention and like the health of a whole. And I do think that there is cases where you need a bit of both for sure, and that's what makes the strongest approach. But I think that there needs to be more of a connection between the two. And like if I'm relating it to personal experience, I remember when I think I was in grade maybe 8 or 9, and I started like feeling anxiety when I would go to school, and like what I knew to be anxiety. And the first thing, is they talk about all these medications that can help you. And my mom was really against it. And at that time, I was kind of upset because I was like, well, my friends are on this and it helps them, but I didn't know anything. And and I don't, and I think that there was talks about counseling as well, but then it was like going on meds first, and then there was a wait list for counseling, and just an interesting way of doing it. And instead of learning about all my symptoms and what they meant, I think I learned that throughout my life, instead of just being told that, instead of just, try this, and if this drug doesn't work, try this one, and if this doesn't work, and then it becomes like this never ending symptom system. And obviously with all sorts of medications there's side effects, and then I do think that, of course, for some things that they are beneficial, absolutely, but I think that there needs to be more education on prevention and management, instead of just, like you said, people just numbing themselves, because that is really, really
Yeah.
common.
I think the big like existential question too is, we're shitting the bed on how to be humans that are happy
Yep.
because, we're in our cars commuting and we're, like the whole big thing is the much bigger question. And I think that a lot of people in your generation are realizing that. I mean, I just came back from 6 months of van life, and the young people are just going, nope, I am going to go see the world, put my feet in the sand, you know, walk through forests, and uh, are basically doing what in the 60s was known as dropping out.
Yeah.
That was, the hippie movement, right? And seeing them, I was like really proud that, you know, certainly my generation was work as hard as you can, make as much money as you can, get the biggest house blah, blah, blah. So I really love what you're saying, because it isn't just about let's wait until you get a mental health challenge. Let's look at
Yeah.
why you're getting it in the first place.
Yeah, and I think the hustle culture is still there, the
Hustle
work, work,
culture.
work. um
I'm so old, I've never heard that term, and I love it.
oh yeah.
I love it.
There
Hustle
is
culture.
definitely still that hustle culture, but it's almost for different.
Yeah.
It's different, and I think a lot of it starts later. I think a lot of people do, like you said, they travel and everything first, and I think a lot of people, at least in health science, when we talk about it a lot, just understand that everything's a shit show right now, and everything's going to affect you. Our foods are processed, our air is polluted, like
It's a
everything.
shit show.
Yeah. Yeah, quite literally, yeah. And you just
Yeah.
have to learn how to best manage it, because it is what it is. And probably putting more shit in your body isn't going to help that in any way.
On behalf of all of us who are part of hustle culture and are older, I'm sorry, I literally ruined it for them. And uh, all I can say is, the generation before us really shit the bed too. So you're the only hope we have.
I think that you're going to do amazing in naturopathic
You.
medicine. I think that just even based on this conversation, like you've got such a head on your shoulders. And I mean, from what we were talking about, like, you know, being able to look at what the root causes are, why you're medicating all this stuff is what naturopathy can pull in and say, like, let's look at this a different way. I mean,
Yeah.
to the extent of like, I've been on anxiety medicine for years.
Hmm.
And when I actually decided to estrange myself from my family, almost 8 months ago or so, very new, my anxiety literally went away. And I literally just forgot to take my anxiety pills, and I have been without them for that long. And
Um,
so you don't know what you don't know. And you don't realize that it's like, what are your actual environmental factors that are
yes.
effing you up? And I thought that was just
Environmental
I just
factors
thought that
are
was so
everything.
wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you've got, such a knowledge base already, again, I know that we've said it a couple times, but you're just so young to have this because you know what? We're in disbelief. I'm in disbelief and of how much you've already kind of soaked in to change this world. And I know you don't know me very well, but I'm really proud of you.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Now you're making me emotional.
Oh, woo!
Well, it gives us hope,
It
right?
does.
Like, it
Yeah.
really gives us hope. And uh long story for another day, because I hope that you'll come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
But long story for another day is that, Amy has helped me because in my age group at, closer to 60, I'll be 57 soon.
Would not have guessed that. You look great.
Thank you. But we a lot of us were in the you just don't talk about it. You just don't talk about it. And I know we're close to the end of our time, but as someone who is closer to 60 soon, it has changed so much, and I'm glad to pass the ball to you because I spoke out about my childhood sexual assault on national television because it was so effing rare to hear anyone who was on television talk about this. And you know, I'm not a big, like rainbows and unicorns kind of person, but like I've got great hope today listening to you because since I was your age and spoke out, look how much has changed.
Mm,
And that gives me great hope. I mean, it was like people wrote me letters on paper
wow.
when it happened and when I spoke out. And
Well, good for you.
yeah, and then he went on once he knew he was cooked. He was assaulting his 3 children, and he knew he was cooked. He drove into a field and shot himself in the head. Did I get psychological counseling? No, because that would have made me feel weak. So look
Wow.
how far we've come.
Yeah, very different.
Yep. Yep. So I'm very proud of you too, and I can't wait to talk to you again and maybe meet you in person one day.
Yes, absolutely. I would love that.
Awesome.
We have hope. You've given us hope, Megan. Thank you. Thank you
Well,
for
thank
coming on and
you.
chatting about this topic with us. We
Yeah.
really appreciate having you.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I would love to come back again. We can meet in person, or maybe I'll have some new insight as of not necessarily September. I'm just starting in September, but a little bit further than then. I can
Yeah,
share some more stuff.
I'm looking
Well,
forward to following you because
yep.
we're hooked into each other on LinkedIn, and
Yes.
I'm just
Yeah.
like, can't wait to see what your future holds.
Oh my goodness. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Well, we're going to end on that note. So, for all of our viewers, I hope that you feel as hopeful about the future as Kimothy and I do. And please like, subscribe, and get notified on YouTube or on your podcast streaming apps. We really appreciate everyone. Until next time on the Inner Shift podcast.